What's up guys, and welcome to another video. We are out here at TK MMA Dubai. It's a beautiful day. I'm about to get stuck into a very rigorous session, but I thought, since there's a cameraman here watching me, I thought I would share with you what I am now doing differently with my training now that I'm in my 30s. I'm 33 years old. I'm still young, but I'm not quite the spring chicken that I used to be back in my 20s, so there's definitely been a few things that have changed. A few guys who are watching who are in your teens or your 20s and thinking, hey, this video is not for me, I don't need to worry, I'm not 30. Well, guess what? You will be before you know it. The time's going to fly by, so you might as well watch this video so you are prepared when you hit the big 3-0. So one of the things that I have changed now that I'm in my 30s is I barely do any flat barbell pressing or decline barbell pressing. I mean, to be honest, I never really did decline barbell pressing just because it was so awkward to do, especially if you're doing it without a spotter. But what I've noticed when I do the flat barbell press, it just doesn't feel that comfortable on the shoulder joint, but also I don't feel like it's the best for maximizing tension on the pecs. So it's a good exercise, yes, if you want to be better at doing the barbell bench press, but in terms of maximizing pectoral hypertrophy, I don't like to do it. I prefer incline. Incline allows you to get a greater range of motion, reduces the risk of damaging the shoulder joint, but still a very good exercise for building the chest. So in my 20s, I used to do a lot of overhead pressing, whether it be seated dumbbell press, machine press, or overhead barbell press. Realistically now, I hardly do any overhead barbell pressing or shoulder pressing. Reason behind that is, realistically, that exercise is primarily building upon the front delt. That's not really something I want to work on, particularly because I do now a lot of incline pressing for my chest. It's getting enough stimulation. Most of my shoulder work now is comprised of doing lateral raise variations to focus on building the mid delt and rear delt fly variations to hit the rear delt. I also take more rest days than I used to take when I used to train in my 20s. In my 20s, I would sometimes train 6 days in a row, sometimes more because I thought more was better. Now, I actually take more rest days than ever before. And that has kind of come around by accident because I'm more busy. So there's days where I maybe don't have time to go to the gym or less time to go to the gym. And I've actually found out that having those extra rest days have meant that the quality of my sessions when I do train are much better, and my ability to maintain or even build muscle has improved because of that recovery time which I'm giving myself. So over the past couple of years, I've followed the approach of 3 days on, 1 off, 3 days on, 1 off. But now, quite a lot of the time it ends up being 2 days on, 1 off, 2 days on, 1 off, or maybe 3 days on, 1 off. There's just a lot more rest days, but it hasn't really had a negative effect on my physique overall. Speaking of rest days, training splits, and intensity, quality over quantity, we have a new training split on my app, the Dorian Yates 4-day HIT approach. This was highly requested by a lot of people who are already members of the app. They wanted to try out the sessions which I did with him over the past year, so I put it into app format, which you can now try. If you are new to the Thirst app, I'm giving new members 40% off the annual subscription, so check out the link in the description to get involved. It's only on for a limited time only. And this app, again, is something which I wish I'd had in my 20s, because when I was in my 20s, I was just improvising, I was just winging it. I would go into the gym with no plan, just doing exercises which I felt like doing, which of course, I made some progress, but I definitely could have progressed a lot further if I'd actually followed a structured training program, tracked the weights which I had lifted, and actually had something to hold myself accountable, particularly when it came to doing the hard exercises. I would avoid doing the hard exercises because I just didn't want to do them. Whereas when you have a plan and you know it's something that you need to do, you're more likely to do it. So another thing which I have changed is the frequency at which I load up my spine. In fact, the only time I really load it up is when I do bent over row or Romanian deadlift. I've chosen to do Romanian deadlift still because I think it's a good exercise for hitting the glutes and hamstrings. But the conventional deadlift, although an extremely good exercise for me, I don't really feel as though it provides me much benefit. The risk to reward ratio is pretty high. So I feel as though there's other exercises which are more beneficial for me to do that will reduce the risk of me injuring my lower back. And the same thing for squats, barbell squat. Great exercise, something which I did a lot in my 20s, although for me personally, I don't feel as though it was best for developing quads, so I've switched that up to doing other quad focused machines which support my lower back, which allows me to lift more weight. I also don't track my calories anymore. The reason behind that is, for a solid 7 years, in my 20s, I was tracking calories. And of course, doing that for 7 years, you learn a lot about what is in the food that you're eating. So it's got to a point now where I can estimate to a pretty high degree of accuracy the amount of calories and the macronutrient split which I'm consuming. Every now and then I will just track just to make sure that I am still on point with my guesstimation, but for the most part, I don't need to. Should you track calories? Well, it's completely dependent upon whether or not you're actually seeing the results you want to see. I feel as though most people who are into bodybuilding and they want to have a great physique, without a doubt you have to learn how to do it. And I would advise you do it for a pretty prolonged period of time so you get that greater understanding and it can improve your ability to just estimate when you're in a situation where you can't track. I also don't really bulk anymore. As you may have noticed, I do stay in quite consistent condition all year round, and that is because I don't really, first of all, want to get any bigger, so I don't need to bulk in order to put on more size. And secondly, it's just a headache when you have to try and lose the body fat after you've done a bulk. I much prefer to just look aesthetic all year round. And a lot of people have this misconception and thinking that I'm below 10% body fat. There's only a few weeks in the year where I'm sub 10%. Most of the time I'm like this, which is realistically around 12 to 15% body fat. But I would say for those people who are beginners or at the early stages of their bodybuilding career, they're realistically going to have to spend a large percentage of the time being in a surplus or a lean bulk in order to actually build a decent amount of muscle mass to begin with. But after you've been training consistently for years, 5 years, 6, 7 years, and you've built that solid base, you don't really have to continue to be in that surplus after that. You can just pull back and kind of maintain a maintenance phase and just keep that condition and amount of muscle mass which you're happy with. I also don't do any 1 rep maxes anymore. I'm sure you guys are pretty aware of this as I've mentioned it a couple of times. I believe the last time I went for 1 rep max was 2020, doing deadlifts. We got up to 250, felt absolutely horrendous, and I just thought, you know what, at this point there's no need for me to be doing that. Risk of injury extremely high, and also I'm not a powerlifter, so what is the purpose of doing it? Of course, if I want to build upon my strength, and it is nice to be strong, I do go through some phases where I'm focusing on strength, but the rep range is maybe between 3 and 6. It doesn't get below that. I don't feel as though it needs to get below that. If you're doing the 1 rep maxes, only good if you want to be doing competitions or if you have an uncontrollable ego and you want to show off to your friends how strong you are. But I'm not about that life. So the strength training, I'll incorporate into my training for a couple of weeks, once every 3 to 4 months, but the rest of the time, more volume, higher rep ranges, slow, control, perfect form, slow tempo. And I've also been placing more priority onto stretching and mobility. Now, I will still say I'm not doing it as much as I would like to, but certainly over the past couple of months, I have been incorporating some form of mobility. 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week to open up my hips and improve my lower back mobility, because I feel as though they're the 2 areas which are a little bit tight and restricted at the moment. In my 20s, obviously that was not a problem. Mobility is still pretty good, but of course doing this for a long period of time, 15 years, without doing the mobility or the stretching, things get tighter, things get more restricted, and then that means your risk of injury and discomfort is going to be a lot higher. So as you get into your 30s, that is unfortunately something which you need to place more priority on. I've also switched up my arm training quite a lot. It's rare now that you'll see me doing barbell curls, easy bar curls, or even machine curls. Basically anything that's using both my arms at the same time. Reason behind that is usually just tends to aggravate my elbows, joints quite a bit. If I do single arm, I can make sure everything is perfectly aligned. So first of all, more joint friendly, but also when I do a single arm, it reduces any potential imbalances, and I have an imbalance. My left bicep is bigger than the right bicep, so doing anything which is going to basically load up both my arms at the same time, the left is always going to want to take over because it's slightly stronger. So now I just focus on doing the individual movements. It also allows you to basically self-spot when you fail. Okay, so if you fail a concentric, spot yourself, take the negative, same thing again, and it works wonders. You don't always have to do the same variation of the preacher curls. I tend to mix it up, different angle, sometimes use cable, sometimes use dumbbell, switch up the grip, sometimes neutral, supinated, maybe a little bit of a Zotman going on. All those little variations, single arm, in my opinion, is all you really need to do to build big biceps. So there we go, session is complete, and I've shared with you a couple of things which I am now doing differently in my 30s. Guess what? In 7 years' time, I'm probably gonna have to make another video when I hit the big 4-0. I wonder what will change at that point in time. Maybe I will be genetically modified at that point, and I can go back to training like a 20-year-old arsehole, but probably not. So it is what it is. Thank you very much for watching. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel, and of course, subscribe to the Thirst app. Best training programs in the game.